Touching Incidents and Remarkable Answers to Prayer by Solomon Benjamin Shaw. Can I Be Saved? Away on the western coast of England, there stands a steep rock that is known to everybody as the Lady's Rock. At high waters it is surrounded by the sea, but at low water it stands upon a sandy beach and is easily reached. It gets the name from an accident that occurred years ago. One summer day, a lady had walked along the beach as far as this rock, and there sat down and began to read a book that interested her. She read on, never thinking of any danger, when she was suddenly startled by a loud cry from the cliffs. The coast guard had seen her and shouted across the bay. She looked up, and in a moment saw her peril. Between herself and the shore there were the churling waves and the white foam spreading over the sands. Her first look showed her nothing but certain death, for the waves were rising every moment, and as she stood hesitating, a huge breaker dashed its spray over her. Above her frowned the steep black rock, and even the fisher lads could scarcely climb to get the seabirds' eggs. There seemed to be no way of escape there. She looked across to the crowd that were gathering on the shore, but no boat could live in that tumbling sea. Then as she stood with the waves creeping up after her like wild beasts that chase their prey, she wrung her hands in agony and burst into tears, crying, "Can I be saved? Can I be saved?" A moment before it was nothing to her. Now it was everything. Wealth, luxury, comfort, pleasure, all thought of these were swept away. Her only anxiety was, oh, to be saved. Then across from the shore came the cry from the coast guard again, "You must climb the rock. Your only chance is to climb the rock." She looked at it, hanging over her with jagged sides and steep, slippery front. How could she climb it? But as she delayed, a wave swept up and flung itself over the place where she stood, and close below her the waves surged and hissed. Then she grasped the rock desperately, and dragged herself up and hung to the face of it, tremblingly feeling for a higher foothold, and rising little by little until she reached a ledge from which she looked shudderingly on the waves below. The tide crept upward until again the spray flew about her. "Climb higher!" rang from the shore, this time from 100 voices, for the tidings of her peril had spread to the adjoining village. Again she gathered her strength, and hardly knowing how, she crept little by little, hanging on with bleeding fingers, dragging herself through narrow openings, pressing up the steep, slippery places, until now within her reach lay a tuft of grass. Seizing it, she fell, fainting on the top, beyond the reach of the waves, while the excited people cried with a shout, "She's saved! Thank heaven, she's saved!" A story wild and strange, like the coast, and yet it is true of every life. True of you, reader, or listener. Slowly the sea is chasing you from point to point. The sea is rising about you. You can look back and see how it has driven you from day to day, from year to year, and yet you are unmindful of it. Taken up with a hundred things, you do not see it. It is the last thing you think of. You have time for everything else. You can think of business, of pleasure, of politics, of the markets, of friendships, of everything else but this. And yet the time is coming when you will see the peril. Then your own eyes shall look upon the threatening danger, and all of these things of today shall be nothing. Suddenly, all in a moment, you will start up with the cry, "What must I do to be saved?" And it may be too late. Reverend Mark Guy Pearce. The Golden Rule Exemplified. Early one morning, while it was yet dark, a poor man came to my door and informed me that he had an infant child very sick, which he was afraid would die. He desired me to go to his home, and, if possible, prescribe some medicine to relieve it, for, said he, I want to save its life, if possible." As he spoke thus, the tears ran down his face. He then added, "I am a poor man, but, doctor, I will pay you and work as much as you ask if you will go." I said, "Yes, I will go with you as soon as I take a little refreshment." "Oh, sir," said he, "I was going to try to get a bushel of corn and get it ground to carry home, and I am afraid the child would die before I get there. I wish you would not wait for me," and then added, "We want to save the child's life if we can." It being some miles to his house, I did not arrive there until the sun was 2 hours high in the morning, when I found the mother holding her sick child, and 6 or 7 little boys and girls around her, with clean hands and faces, looking as their mother did, lean and poor. On examining the sick child, I discovered that it was starving to death. I said to the mother, "You don't give milk enough for this child." She said, "I suppose I don't." "Well," said I, "you must feed it with milk." She answered, "I would, sir, but I can't get any to feed it with." I then said, "It will be well then for you to make a little water gruel and feed your child." To this she replied, "I was thinking I would if my husband brings home some Indian meal. He has gone to try to get some, and I am in hopes he will make it out." She said this with a sad countenance. I asked her with surprise, "Why, madam, have you not got anything to eat?" She strove to suppress a tear, and answered sorrowfully, "No, sir, we have had but little these some days." I said, "What are your neighbors, that you should suffer among them?" She said, "I suppose they are good people, but we are strangers in this place, and don't wish to trouble any of them, if we can get along without it." Wishing to give the child a little manna, I asked for a spoon. The little girl went to the table drawer to get one, and her mother said to her, "Get the longest handled spoon." And she opened the drawer. I saw only 2 spoons, and both with handles broken off, but one handle was a little longer than the other. I thought to myself, this is a very poor family, but I will do the best I can to relieve them. While I was preparing the medicine for the sick child, I heard the oldest boy, who was about 14, say, "You shall have the biggest piece now, because I had the biggest piece before." I turned around to see who it was that manifested such a principle of justice, and saw 4 or 5 children sitting on the corner, where the oldest was dividing roasted potatoes among them. And he said to one, "You shall have the biggest piece now," etc. But the other said, "Why, brother, you are the oldest, and you ought to have the biggest piece." "No," said the other, I had the biggest piece." I turned to the mother and said, "Madam, you have potatoes to eat, I suppose?" She replied, "We have had, but that is the last one we have left, and the children have now roasted that for their breakfast." On hearing this, I hastened home and informed my wife that I had taken the wrong medicine with me to the sick family. I then prescribed a gallon of milk, 2 loaves of bread, some butter, meat and potatoes, and sent my boy with these, and had the pleasure to hear in a few days that they were all well. Selected. A Guiding Voice. A touching story came to us from Minnesota. A farmer, living on the edge of one of the many lakes of that state, started to cross it in a small sailboat one evening after dark. The wind changed, and a gust overturned the boat when he was in the middle of the lake. The surface of the water was covered with large masses of floating ice. The farmer was an expert swimmer, and he struck out boldly towards the shore, where he thought his house stood. But he grew confused in the darkness. The ice formed rapidly over the whole lake. He was in a small, quick, narrowing circle, in which he beat about wildly, the chill of death creeping over his body. He gave up at last, and was sinking in the freezing water, when he heard a sound. It was the voice of his little girl calling him, "Father! "Father!" He listened. The sound of her voice would tell him which way home lay. It put fresh life into him. He thought, if she would only call once more, but she will be frightened at the dark and cold, and will go in and shut the door. But just then came the cry, loud and clear, "Father!" "I turned," said the man afterward in telling his story, "and struck out in the opposite direction. I had been going away from home. I fought my way. The ice broke before me. I reached the shore and home at last. But if my dear little girl had not persisted in calling me, though hearing no reply, I would have died there alone under the ice." What a multitude of souls about us, like that poor man, have lost their balance and let go their grip on the lifeboat and are struggling amid the cold, icy waves of sin, soon to sink to the bottomless pit and be forever lost, unless someone goes as near to them as possible and calls them in the right direction. Just one word spoken in Jesus' name may show them the right way and be the means of their salvation. Dear brother, the sound of your voice, the words you may speak, the kind action you may do, may show some fallen brother the right way home. Oh, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not.